What are accessorial charges in truckload transportation? Have you ever heard the phrase accessorial charge and wondered, what does it mean? As a freight broker, we usually prefer to simplify the way that we invoice our customers and pay our carriers. But sometimes things get a little bit more complicated and we have to account for extra charges. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Nate Cross with Freight 360. And in this week's video, we're talking about accessorial freight charges. By the way, hope you like my Bills jersey. If you're new to our channel, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that little notification icon down below to make sure that you stay up to date on our latest content. All right, so what is an accessorial charge? Most freight brokers and carriers are preferring to deal with all-in pricing for full truckload shipments. It keeps things very clean and it prevents confusion. In some cases, we'll separate the line haul rate from the fuel rate just to account for fluctuating diesel prices. But what about some of the other unforeseen costs that might pop up during the actual transit of a shipment? We call those accessorial charges, and you're likely to run into these as a freight broker. So let's take a look at 5 of the most common accessorial charges that you're likely to come across as a broker. Those are detention, TONU, additional stops, layover, and lumpers. All right, first on the list is detention. Detention is a term that we use to describe time that is spent sitting at a shipper or receiver waiting for the driver to be loaded or unloaded. Now, since shippers and receivers can be extremely busy at different times, it's pretty common for a truck driver to wait a little bit for an available dock door to open up or for the workers to load or unload the truck. Since that wait time is pretty common and it's generally accepted across the industry standard for unpaid wait time is 2 hours. That means the first 2 hours that the driver's there, they can expect to just not receive any additional payment. Any waiting time beyond the 2 hours is where the detention will tend to kick in. Now, this can vary by facility, so make sure to check with your specific customer on their standard operating procedures. Now, once the driver passes the 2 hour of free waiting time, it's pretty normal to pay somewhere about $50 an hour in detention to your driver. So let's look at an example. If a driver is going to wait 4 hours at a facility, they would receive 2 hours of detention since the first 2 hours would be free. So that would give them $100 if they're getting $50 an hour. This is a charge that should be invoiced directly to your customer and passed directly through to your carrier. No additional profit should be made by you as a freight broker. Next up, we have the TONU, the truck order not used. As the name implies, this is a cost that's paid to your driver for hiring them and then not actually using their truck, hence truck order not used. What you're doing here is you're compensating your driver for their time even though they didn't actually haul the shipment for your customer. Now, there is some gray area here with the TONU, since timing comes into play really big here. Let's look at 2 examples where a TONU would and would not be necessary. Let's say you hire a driver to pick up a load today. The driver starts heading towards the pickup, but your customer cancels the load an hour before the pickup. Your driver is already on their way, and he's wasted fuel and time on your shipment. This is a prime example of when you should pay a TONU to that driver. Your customer should be responsible to pay the TONU, typically around $200, and you would pass that directly onto the driver for their time. Let's look at another example. Let's say you hire a driver for a load that picks up maybe tomorrow or the next day, and it cancels shortly after you book the driver. The driver is likely still delivering their previous load that has nothing to do with you, and they have not started working on your load just yet. So you would likely not pay a TONU in this situation. Now, there is some debate as to when a TONU should be paid, but it's generally accepted that TONUs are only paid if a driver is actively working on your shipment at the time of the order cancellation. Next, we'll take a look at additional stops. Not all loads just have one pickup and one delivery. It'd be a great world if that's how they all were, but that's just not the reality. Some have additional stops, whether they're planned or unplanned, and this can result in an accessorial charge, which we call additional stops. If a load has 3 or more stops, the extra stop can be factored into the line haul rate for the driver, or you can actually break this down and itemize it as an accessorial charge. You might see somewhere around $50 to $100 for each additional stop when you're pricing out a load. Now, if a load has an unexpected additional stop, like maybe the delivery is being split into 2 deliveries, after the driver's already in transit, you're definitely gonna wanna break this one out as an additional pay item to your driver and invoice your customer accordingly. Extra stops mean extra time for your driver and likely some extra fuel as well. Let's look at layovers. A layover is like the big brother of detention. Rather than waiting a few hours, a driver might have to wait overnight and redeliver the load the next day. That's what we call a layover, and you can expect to pay somewhere around $500 for this, depending on the equipment type you're dealing with. Some equipment types are more rare than others, so you might pay more in those situations. Now, a driver loses a lot of time with layovers, and sometimes it can impact their next scheduled load. Layovers are gonna be paid by your customer when the customer is at fault. Maybe they had a very busy facility or a lack of labor, or they had something going on that caused them to not be able to get that truck loaded or unloaded. If a driver has to wait overnight because they were late to the pickup or late to the delivery, your customer is not gonna pay that layover. And you might even have to charge a late fee to your driver for being late. So it's important to document all of your in and out times for drivers so we can determine who is at fault for the layover and detention for that matter. Lastly, let's cover lumpers. A lumper is a gig worker that is contracted on a per load basis to load or unload a trailer. Oftentimes, you'll see lumper workers at large facilities, such as produce distributors. They don't work for the customer and they don't work for the carrier, so they'll need a separate payment at the time of their services. Customers are typically aware of the use of lumpers at their facilities, so they're gonna let you know ahead of time if a lumper will be used and how much the lumper payment will be. These can range anywhere from roughly $75 and sometimes up to $200, and they will add this amount to your pay after verifying the lumper receipt with their invoice. Since the driver is the one that is actually on site with the lumper at the time that they load or unload, they're gonna be the one that usually pays the lumper fee out of pocket, and they're gonna expect to be reimbursed by you, the broker. They might even ask for an advance from you to pay for the lumper up front rather than having to wait for reimbursement. It's very, very important to make sure that you get receipts from your carriers for any time a lumper is being used. So those are some of the most common accessorial charges that you're gonna see in the full truckload world. We're gonna break down some of these in more detail in our future content. Let us know what you think, and we'll see you in the next video.